Nearly every denomination of Christianity commemorates the resurrection of Christ annually on Easter Sunday. Why, Easter is considered by many to be the most important observance of the Christian calendar. But is it truly Christian? Where did the name Easter come from? Is it in agreement with the biblical text? What do colored eggs and bunnies have to do with Christ's resurrection? Well, whether you plan to celebrate this holiday or not, you need to know. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, Easter is one of the most cherished of all religious holidays. The observance is traditionally celebrated with baked ham, hot cross buns, colored eggs, and confections of all sorts. Traditional activities are sunrise church services and Easter egg hunts. But are such activities Christian? Most who celebrate Easter claim that the holiday represents the resurrection of Christ. But if the observance claims to be focused on the Messiah, why the prominent theme of an egg-laying rabbit? Where did the name Easter come from? Is it actually mentioned in the Bible? Well, the information presented in this program may be surprising to you, but keep in mind that what you're about to hear and see are facts of history. What the archaeological evidence reveals is that Easter's observance came from heathen civilizations that existed long before the birth of Christ. Babylon, Egypt, Sidonia, Greece, Assyria, and many other cultures had a long history of worshiping fertility gods and practicing religious rites that are directly linked to Easter. And the first piece of evidence is blatantly displayed in the name itself. Why, Easter is not a Christian term. The name came from an ancient goddess of spring that has been worshipped by pagans for thousands of years. As Grolier's Encyclopedia of Knowledge states, the name Easter is derived from the pagan spring festival of the Anglo-Saxon goddess Eostre, and many folk customs associated with Easter are of pagan origin. The Encyclopedia Britannica, Compton's Encyclopedia, and many other historians and scholars agree that Easter and its customs have come from pre-Christian festivals. Thus, Easter is not a Christian term. It's the name of a pagan goddess. But the name is not unique to the Anglo-Saxon tribes. Why, Eostre was also known as Ishtar in Babylon, Astarte in Greece, Ostara in Assyria, Ashur in Phoenicia, and Ashtoreth among many of the Canaanite tribes. The name, of course, varied depending on the language and region of her worship. Ethel Yerlin is another historian who researched church festivals and discovered that Easter is in fact associated with pagan rites. And she wrote, "On this greatest of Christian festivals, several survivals occur of ancient heathen ceremonies. To begin with, the name itself is not Christian, but pagan. Ostara was the Anglo-Saxon goddess of spring. Ostara, also known as Ishtar, was worshipped from ancient times as a goddess of many things, but her primary reverence was connected to sex and fertility. Therefore, her festivals occurred during the spring when plants begin to bloom and the mating activity of nature increases. The renowned historian Will Durant studied ancient civilizations and described Easter festivities, writing, Ishtar was the goddess of war as well as of love, of prostitutes as well as of mothers. She was represented sometimes as a bearded bisexual deity, sometimes as a nude female offering her breasts. Astarte was the Greek of the Phoenician Ishtar. She had the distinction of being worshipped in some places as the goddess of a cold Artemisian chastity, and in others as the amorous and wanton deity of physical love. As Ishtar Mylida received and sacrificed the virginity of her girl devotees at Babylon, so the women who honored Astarte at Byblos had to give up their long tresses to her, or surrender themselves to the first stranger who solicited their love in the precincts of the temple. Religious prostitution flourished. The sacrifice of virginity at the temple was not only an offering to Astarte, but a participation with her in that annual self-abandonment which, it was hoped, would offer irresistible suggestion to the earth and ensure the increase of plants, animals, and men. All of the information on this subject is shocking, especially when we consider that millions now associate fertility rites with a supposed Christian holiday. But this information helps us to recognize the reason for Easter's symbols of rabbits and eggs. The traditions of Easter seem like good, clean fun. The symbol of a cute, fuzzy bunny is seemingly harmless. But this mascot of Easter is actually connected to pagan rites. And this fact is well known and noted by scholars of world religions who wrote, "The rabbit was known as an extraordinarily fertile creature, and hence it symbolized the coming of spring. Although adopted in a number of Christian cultures, the Easter bunny had never received any specific Christian interpretation." Not only does the religious use of eggs and rabbits come from pagan sources, those who claim to be Christian need to recognize that there truly is no Christian interpretation for rabbits. And this isn't surprising when we recognize that Easter is not Christian. Why, the pagan symbols of new life continue to be an indelible part of its observance. And the reason why pagans chose to use rabbits as a mascot for Ishtar's fertility festivities is because of their rapid breeding process. Why, most rabbits are sexually mature by 4.5 months of age. Their breeding season lasts 3/4 of the year, and gestation is little more than 30 days. In addition, once their babies are born, the mother can mate and get pregnant again the following day. And apply this process over a rabbit's lifetime, and it's possible for a doe to produce over 1,000 bunnies. These facts have been known from antiquity and led heathen cultures to use the rabbit as a symbol of sexual fertility. And this is openly admitted by the organization that is responsible for grafting Easter into the church. Why, the Catholic Encyclopedia states, "A great many pagan customs celebrating the return of spring and therefore directly related to sun worship gravitated to Easter. The egg is the emblem of the germinating life of early spring. The Easter rabbit lays the eggs, for which reason they are hidden in a nest or in the garden. The rabbit is a pagan symbol and has always been an emblem of fertility." A study of church holidays and secular customs led Ethel Yerlin to also publish the following regarding the Easter bunny. "In some places," she wrote, "hares instead of or combined with eggs are given as presents at Easter. This is a survival of the connection of the hare in Teutonic myths with Eostre or Ostara, the goddess of dawn and spring. Catching the hare was a custom at the festival of the Easter goddess Eostre, as the hare was her emblem, just as it was the emblem of Aphrodite in Greece." Despite the heathen history, the Easter bunny continues to be a symbol used by millions who claim to worship Christ. However, the rabbit's use as a religious symbol of fertility predates Christianity by centuries. And though it now coexists with what many consider to be Christian rites, this tradition has been passed down from ancient pagan cultures, and it is not Christian. In fact, modern-day Wiccans and Neo-pagans are well aware of this truth, and they continue to use rabbits and eggs in their worship of Ishtar. The connection between Easter and pagan deities is well documented, and the association can also be seen by comparing heathen rites to the traditions that many practice today. Another series of evidence can be found in the Easter egg. By decorating eggs with dye, paint, glitter, and a multitude of colors is one of the most notable traditions of Easter. But where did this behavior come from? Well, according to the Encyclopedia of Religion, in traditional folk religion, the egg is a powerful symbol of fertility, purity, and rebirth. It is used in magical rituals to promote fertility and restore virility, to look into the future, to bring good weather, to encourage the growth of crops and protect both cattle and children against misfortune, especially the dreaded evil eye. All over the world, it represents life and creation, fertility and resurrection. In early times, eggs were interred with the dead. Later, they were linked with Easter. Notice what a pagan encyclopedia notes regarding the ancient misuse of eggs and rabbits. The Easter bunny was older than Christianity. Recalling the myths of Hathor Astarte, who laid the golden egg of the sun, Germans used to say the hare would lay eggs for good children on Easter Eve. The Persians began their solar new year at the spring equinox, and up to the middle of the 18th century they still followed the old customs of presenting each other with colored eggs on the occasion. Eggs were always the symbol of rebirth, which is why Easter eggs were usually colored red, the life color, that is, of blood. Pagan superstitious customs involving eggs were many. And despite knowing about its heathen use, the expanding Roman Empire merged with the Catholic Church, and they began to adopt many heathen traditions, including the pagan use of the egg. According to the Encyclopedia of World Religions, the Church did not oppose this, though many egg customs were pre-Christian in origin, because the egg provided a fresh and powerful symbol of the resurrection and the transformation of death into life. Ethel Yerlin also explained how the Catholic Church integrated paganism into its liturgy. She wrote, "The custom of giving eggs at Easter is very ancient and worldwide. The ritual of Pope Paul V Christianized the pagan custom." Ladies and gentlemen, God would never approve of using eggs to represent the resurrection of Christ. In fact, God forbids a religious use of the creation, as clearly stated in the second commandment. Why, the New Testament church was well aware of this, and the Apostle Paul noted that it's heathen cultures that have exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worshiped and served the creation rather than the Creator. Ladies and gentlemen, as innocent as Easter eggs may seem to most people, they simply have no place in Christianity. And this is just a drop in the bucket of evidence revealing the heathen connection to Easter. And you need to know more about this subject, and there is much more for you to know. And for this reason, Quest for Truth has produced a free and informative booklet. The Eternal Church of God produces a variety of free literature to help people understand the Bible and how God expects Christians to live. Today we are featuring the booklet titled The Truth About Easter. This booklet explains the origin of the Easter holiday as well as the many symbols and activities associated with it. In addition, this booklet reveals how an apostate church adopted Easter and attempted to Christianize it, which is why most people celebrate Easter today. All of our material is offered free of charge as a service in the public interest with no undesired follow-up. You may visit our website or stay tuned, and at the end of this program we will show you how to request a free copy of The Truth About Easter. Despite the mountain of evidence revealing the origin of Easter and its customs, some may still think that it's acceptable to celebrate the resurrection of Christ on Easter Sunday. However, did Christ truly rise from the tomb on Sunday morning? Have you ever considered the evidence proving one way or another? I mean, think about it. If Christ's body was placed in the grave on Friday evening, as most suppose, how can we derive the prophesied 3 days and 3 nights between Friday night and Sunday morning? What may come as a shock to you is Christ did not rise from the grave on Sunday morning, and his body was not placed in the sepulcher on Friday evening. In fact, sunrise worship services is another adoption of pagan beliefs. As Barbara Walker acknowledged, Easter is the springtime sacrificial festival named for the Saxon goddess Eostre, or Ostara, a northern form of Astarte. It is fixed as the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. And so we see the heathen tradition of observing Easter as the first Sunday after the spring equinox was adopted as a supposed day of Christ's resurrection. In fact, sunrise worship services are also based on what was practiced by pagans. As Ethel Yerlin wrote, there is a reflection of ancient solar or fire worship in some of the well-known Easter ceremonies. Could this be true? Is there a reflection of sun worship in Easter activities? Well, consider a biblical example describing an event in which a number of people turned their back on God. They gave honor to a pagan deity associated with Easter and worshiped the sun at its rising. Speaking to the prophet Ezekiel, God said, "Turn again and you will see greater abominations that they are doing." And so he brought me to the door of the north gate of the Eternal's house, and to my dismay, women were sitting there weeping for Tammuz. At the door of the temple of the Eternal, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Eternal, and their faces toward the east, and they were worshiping the sun toward the east. This example shows us that sunrise worship services did not originate in honor of Christ. Why, they are related to pagans who worship Tammuz, who is a counterpart to Ishtar. Why, Sandra Cicero studied the ancient religions of Mesopotamia, and she provides details of the Tammuz and sunrise connection. Mesopotamian religion viewed the sexual union between male and female as essential to the productivity of the land. Sex was also considered pleasing to the gods, particularly to the goddess Ishtar, the goddess of love and erotica. The Babylonians explained the creation of the universe as a result of a series of divine marriages between pairs of deities. The divine couple associated with this sacred marriage was Ishtar and Tammuz. The pagan deity of Ishtar had many fables and names associated with her. Why, the Bible documents her influence on 10 of the tribes of Israel who lost everything because they forsook God and they worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians. Found in modern-day Lebanon, Ashtoreth is the same false god that was known elsewhere as Ishtar, Eostre, and Easter. Why, occult advocate Barbara Walker described Ashtoreth as one of the great false goddesses of heathen history, and she wrote, "Ishtar is the Babylonian star, the great goddess who appears in the Bible as Ashtoreth, Aneth, Asherah, or Esther, the queen of heaven." Another of her titles was the goddess Har, who also called herself the compassionate prostitute. Men communed with her through the sexual rites of her harlot priestess. Akkadian sources show that Ishtar was the same great goddess revered all over the Near East. Not only was Tammuz and Ishtar worshipped on Sunday morning after the spring equinox, Christ did not rise from the dead Sunday morning. Why, consider the biblical evidence documenting the events. The only begotten Son of God declared that he would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And this was the concluding evidence proving that he was the Messiah. Now, his words were not a riddle or some kind of Jewish idiom. And any misrepresentation of 3 days and 3 nights would be deceptive and a lie, making Christ out to be a liar. But Christ always told the truth, and therefore the Savior died and his body was placed in a tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. In fact, the historical record of his crucifixion states that Christ was crucified on a preparation day, John 19:14 and Luke 23:54. And it's common knowledge that God's people have long referred to Friday as a day of preparation before observing the weekly Sabbath. And for this reason, many assume that Christ died on a Friday. However, what many do not realize is there are also days of preparation preceding each of God's annual Sabbaths, known as feasts or holy days. And this forgotten truth stems from the fact that most believers now disregard God's true holy days, but that's a topic for another program. Understanding that there are other days of preparation besides Friday, the New Testament scriptures reveal that Christ died on the day of Passover, which is an annual day of preparation before celebrating the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is an annual Sabbath. As the Apostle John wrote in his gospel record, now it was the preparation day of the Passover. And therefore, because it was the preparation day, that the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day. The Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that the bodies might be taken away. The Bible clearly indicates that Christ was not crucified on a preparation day of Friday. Instead, the Scriptures indicate that Christ was crucified on the preparation day of the Passover. And ancient calendars reveal that on the year of Christ's death, the Passover occurred on a Wednesday, and his body was placed in a tomb as the sun was setting that evening, and his body laid in the tomb all that night, and he was in the sepulchre all day Thursday and the following night, and his body was in the grave all day Friday and the following night, and his body was in the tomb all day on the Sabbath. Finally, the Messiah rose from the dead as the sun was setting at the end of the Sabbath. And for this reason we read that when the women came to the tomb Sunday morning, the sun had not yet risen, and the resurrection already occurred, as John 20 and verse 1 documents. Now the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. And so it was still dark when Mary went to the tomb Sunday morning, and the resurrection had already taken place. Therefore, Christ was not crucified on a Friday, and he did not rise from the grave on Sunday morning. Why, that would only add up to 1 day and 2 nights. And Christ is not a liar or a deceiver. Just as he prophesied, he was in the heart of the earth for 72 hours. And this truth is thoroughly explained in our free booklet titled, "The Resurrection Was Not on Sunday." Contrary to popular belief, Easter has nothing to do with worshiping Christ. Neither is it found in the New Testament scriptures. And some might think the contrary and claim that Easter can be found, at least in the King James translation of Acts 12 and verse 4. However, the verse in question suffers from inference and a gross mistranslation. Why, notice what the famous Bible commentator Albert Barnes wrote regarding the King James rendering of Acts 12:4. He said, "There never was a more absurd or unhappy translation than this. The original is simply after the Passover. The word Easter now denotes the festival observed by many Christian churches in honor of the resurrection of the Savior, but the original has no reference to that. The word Easter is of Saxon origin and is supposed to be derived from Eostre, the goddess of love, or the Venus of the North, in honor of whom a festival was celebrated by our pagan ancestors in the month of April." Understanding that Christ did not rise from the dead on Sunday morning and that Easter is not even found in the Bible, why do so many who claim to believe in Christ celebrate this holiday? How did it become associated with Christianity? Well, Easter's transference began over 200 years after Christ's death in the 2nd century AD. And the expanding Roman Catholic Church began adopting holidays and traditions of pagans in an attempt to convert the masses that the Roman armies had conquered. Why, consider just a few quotes from the many sources acknowledging the heretical practices. The clergy had believed it necessary to hasten the conversion of the masses of people. They had to be content with teaching them no more than the symbol of baptism and then baptizing them en masse or in large groups, postponing until a later date the task of eradicating their superstitions, which they preserved intact. To tell the truth, this later date never arrived, and the Church adapted to herself as well as she could, them and their customs and beliefs. On their side, they were content to dress their paganism in a Christian cloak. To conciliate the pagans to nominal Christianity, Rome, pursuing its usual policy, took measures to get the Christian and pagan festivals amalgamated. And, by a complicated but skillful adjustment of the calendar, it was found no difficult matter, in general, to get paganism and Christianity, now sunk far in idolatry, in this as in so many other things, to shake hands. By a stroke of tactical genius, the Church, while intolerant of pagan beliefs, was able to harness the powerful emotions generated by pagan worship. Easter, for instance, a time of sacrifice and rebirth in the Christian year, takes its name from the Norse goddess Eostre, in whose honor rites were held every spring. She in turn was simply a northern version of the Phoenician Earth Mother Astarte, goddess of fertility. It's important for us to realize that the church leaders who adopted heathen holidays were not those led by Christ and the apostles. The apostate church was that of the combined church and state government based in Rome, and the unholy Roman Empire emerged as the largest religious organization in history when a church aligned with the Roman Empire and began to embrace pagan holidays and their religious rites. The heathen festivals received a makeover in an attempt to paint a Christian image of what they should represent. But this is an apostasy. Why, it directly violates God's admonition to not learn the way of the heathen. For every abomination that He hates, they have done to their gods. It also directly violates the first 3 commandments: to have no other gods, to not use idols or elements of the creation in a religious manner, and to not take God's name in vain. Albeit unknowingly, those who celebrate Easter today are not honoring Christ. They are respecting abominable counterfeits designed by the devil. Why, many Wiccans and Neo-pagans are well aware of this truth, and they continue to honor the devil in their springtime rituals observed on the same day that millions celebrate Easter. According to the Sociology of Religion website, Easter is the beginning of the pagan year, at least among Wiccans and Celtics. This is the time of the spring equinox and is a great time to celebrate the rebirth of the soil and of the land. Despite all of this blatant truth, most pastors, ministers, and priests presumptuously claim that God has sanctioned the use of pagan holidays, and they teach their congregants that pagan symbols can be used in honor of Christ. But such ministers are deceived, and such a belief is a flat-out lie. And don't you be fooled. Christ's admonition to all believers declares that God is a spirit, and those who worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. Easter is not truth. Why, the only certainty about this holiday is that we can be sure it's inspired by a wicked spirit of disobedience to God. Why, in fact, it's a lie covered in chocolate, dressed up with marshmallow peeps and brightly colored eggs and bunnies. And even though many who observe it may claim to believe in Christ, why, the symbols and traditions of Easter, they actually mock Him. Whether you plan to observe Easter or not, you need to know more about this subject, and you can know more. To help you, Quest for Truth has produced a free and informative booklet. The Eternal Church of God produces a variety of free literature to help people understand the Bible and how God expects Christians to live. Today we are featuring the booklet titled The Truth About Easter. This booklet explains the origin of the Easter holiday as well as its many symbols and activities. It will explain the pagan use of the Easter bunny, Easter eggs, hot cross buns, baked ham, and sunrise services. Most importantly, our literature explains from the Bible why you should have nothing to do with Easter. All of our material is offered free of charge as a service in the public interest with no undesired follow-up. You can visit our website or stay tuned, and in just a few moments we will show you how to request a free copy of The Truth About Easter. Until next time, this is Terry Moore saying thanks for watching.
No one knows the day or hour when the end shall come to pass. Not the angels that dwell in heaven, only the Father from above. No one knows the day or hour